the Mountain States Regional Office of the Anti-Defamation League, the Colorado Coalition for Genocide Awareness and Action, the Holocaust Awareness Institute at the University of Denver Center for Judaic Studies, the Interfaith Alliance of Colorado, the Mazzell Museum, the Denver Parks and Recreation Department's Bobby R. Park, the Mountain States Regional Office of the Jewish National Fund, the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C., and the University of Colorado Program in Jewish Studies.
Senator General.
Thank you, Mr. President, and members, please be seated. Thank you also for taking the time today to reflect and honor the lives lost during the Holocaust almost 80 years ago. Anti-Semitism has been present since the beginning of Jewish history. From ancient Babylonia to the economic, social, and political policies enacted during the European Middle Ages and to the Russian pogroms throughout the 1800s, anti-Semitism has been woven into the world fabric for over 2,000 years. As Hitler rose to power during the 1930s, he wielded anti-Semitism as a tool to achieve his goal of German nationalism, racial purity, and global expansion. He continually placed blame on Germany's Jewish community for the country's defeat of World War I and the dark economic times that followed. In 1935, Hitler enacted the Nuremberg Laws, which dismissed Jews from civil service, dissolved Jewish-owned businesses, and eventually stripped them from the right to vote and citizenship. These policies and the propaganda that followed culminated in the Holocaust, which resulted in the murder of 6 million Jews, 5 million non-Jews, including Romans, communists, Jehovah's Witnesses, and the LGBTQ community. Despite the horrors of the Holocaust over the last decade, anti-Semitism has seen a sharp uptick throughout the world. In 2018, France reported a 74% increase over the previous year in anti-Semitic incidents, including the murder of a Holocaust survivor in her own home. During the same period in Germany, violent anti-Semitic attacks, 62 of them, rose by 60%. And in our very own backyard, the number of reported anti-Semitic incidents from 2015 to 17 tripled in Colorado, with the most recent incident occurring on April the 8th, when a swastika was burned into the sidewalk outside of a Denver elementary school. These incidents serve as a reminder that anti-Semitism and hate is not a remnant of the past, and it is our duty as people to speak up, to speak out, and not let hate and fear show division and mistrust among us. Several years ago, I was traveling through Poland. I wanted to visit Poland because that's where my father's father was born and my ancestors were on my father's side, mainly from the Krakow area. And if any of you have gone to Krakow, it's a very beautiful city, a very happy city full of music and art. And it's hard to imagine what Krakow was like 75 or 80 years ago. I took a sobering trip 50 miles outside of this beautiful city to Auschwitz and to Birkenau. The shock and the sorrow has stayed with me and always will be with me. Growing up, I never was made aware of the cruelty, the hatred, and the dehumanization the Jews had suffered. My parents told me not to ever say my ancestry was from Poland. I was American. That's all I was supposed to say. I didn't question that. My best friend from kindergarten through college was Jewish, and we never talked about why she celebrated different holidays than I did. I'd seen a few of the PBS specials on the Holocaust and the horrifying things that happened. But you know, as most of us, we see it, we're horrified by it, and we move on. And then I fell in love with a man who was Jewish, and we got married. But before we could marry, I had to convert to Judaism. And that meant learning about the Jewish faith and the tradition with a rabbi. My studies were over 9 months, which taught me so much about the Jewish ways of life and the Jewish religion. And I continue today to identify proudly as a Reformed Jew. At Auschwitz, I saw the atrocities the Jews, the Poles, gays, and others went through, and it sent chills through my soul. Over 1,100,000 people died at Auschwitz. 90% of those were Jews, and the SS murdered the majority of them in gas chambers. I remember driving down the beautiful country roads and taking a turn and seeing the railroad tracks, which basically led to nowhere. The last stop for millions of innocent people. I remember at the large iron sign that was at the main gate, translated from German to English, and I won't do I cannot pronounce the German part of it, but if you translate it from German to English, it means work will make you free. And in reality, it meant that torture and death were the only ways to be free. I still cannot forget the piles of human hair, gold teeth, eyeglasses, shoes, even baby shoes, and the hundreds of empty canisters that had contained cyanide pellets. The feeling I had when I walked into the showers and saw the crematory ovens where millions were burned were beyond words. The ponds behind the crematory ovens are still gray. They were when I visited. I assume they're still gray today. 80 years later, due to the human ashes that were dumped there. And to this day, and for the rest of my life, I can never forget. And the world must never forget. It's important not to allow the Holocaust or Auschwitz or any of those other camps to fade from collective memory. Why? Because people need to know, and they need to ask why. How could anyone have done this? Why didn't anyone stop them? And lastly, what do we do each day to make sure that this never happens again?
Is there further discussion? Senator Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. President and colleagues. In this